All right, diving deep today and into a region that you don't really think of when you think of great wine, Golan Heights wines. We've got articles and research, whole bunch of stuff about how this area, it's known for, all the geopolitical stuff, but is making incredible wines.
Yeah, it's really interesting, how the geography and the geology and just everything's come together to create this wine region that people are starting to, notice around the world.
Yeah, we're talking vineyards that are like carved into volcanic slopes up above the Sea of Galilee. Not really your typical wine country image, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a look and figure out what makes Golan Heights wine so special.
Well, you really can't understand the wine without understanding where it's coming from. And Golan Heights has, obviously seen a lot of political instability, and that is like built into the story of how they make wine.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so interesting, like how winemakers have been able to not only make wine, but make really good award-winning wine with all this crazy stuff going on. Talking about, rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about, how much does that backdrop actually impact the wine itself?
Well, it definitely has like an impact on the people and how they approach winemaking. But I think beyond that, the Golan Heights has this really incredible terroir, all those natural things that make it a good place to grow grapes.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Yeah.
What is it that makes this terroir so special? I kept seeing stuff about volcanic soil. What does that do to the wine?
Oh, the volcanic soil is super important. It's from eruptions way back, and it's full of minerals like magnesium and potassium, and it drains really well. So that shows up in the wines. A lot of times you get these really interesting mineral notes, like a kind of flinty or salty taste that some wine lovers really love.
So you say you could like taste the volcano in the glass. Is that where that like minerality comes from that people talk about?
Yeah, exactly. But it's not just the soil. The Golan Heights also have all these like elevation changes. You've got vineyards that are planted like 400 to 1,200 meters above sea level. And being that high up means you get cool nights even when it's hot during the day. That's really important for the grapes.
Why is that cool night, hot day thing so important? Does that actually change how the grapes taste?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those cool nights help the grapes keep their acidity, which makes the wine taste nice and bright and refreshing. But then the hot days, help the grapes get perfectly ripe and build up all those complex sugars that make the wine taste so good, during fermentation. It's all about getting that balance.
It sounds like the Golan Heights is like the perfect spot to grow these intensely flavored grapes. But I also read about all these microclimates, like smaller little climate zones within the region. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, the microclimates are fascinating. You can have two vineyards that are just a couple miles apart, and they'll have totally different temperatures, sunlight, even different soil. So winemakers can grow a bunch of different grape types, and each one will do really well in its own little spot.
That's crazy. It's like every bottle of wine has its own little personality, from the land. But something else that really surprised me, Golan Heights used to be known for table grapes, right? Like the kind you eat, not make wine with. How did they make the switch to fancy winemaking?
It's a pretty amazing change. For a long time, it was all about those big, juicy table grapes. That was their main thing. But then some, really forward-thinking winemakers realized that Golan Heights could make high-quality wine. They saw the terroir, the microclimates, and they knew they could do something special.
So they were like pioneers going against the grain, saying, hey, this place can make world-class wine. What were some of the biggest things they had to overcome?
It was a big risk. They had to invest in new technology, experiment with all kinds of grapes, and convince people that Golan Heights wine was worth paying attention to. And one of the first big challenges was just not having enough water. It's a pretty dry area, so they had to figure out how to water the vines without using up all the water.
It sounds like they had to get pretty creative. I'm starting to see how Golan Heights wine is all about overcoming obstacles and exceeding expectations.
Totally. And you can really feel that like resilience when you taste the wine.
Okay, well, I'm ready to hear more about these wines. In part 2, let's get into the specifics. The grapes, the flavors, what makes these wines stand out,
Yeah, happy to share some secrets. Let's talk about what makes like Golan Heights Chardonnay different from, say, a California Chardonnay. And then we can dive into the reds, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, even Pinot Noir, which is super hard to grow.
Stay with us, folks, because things are about to get really good. We'll be back after a quick break. All right, we're back and ready to dig into the grapes themselves, the heart of Golan Heights winemaking. I'm really curious about the white wines. I saw Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, even like Riesling and Gewürztraminer in the articles, and those are grapes I usually think of from cooler places.
You're right. Golan Heights has a pretty surprising range of white grapes. Like Chardonnay, for example, you probably know the buttery, oaky kind from California, but here it's a little different.
Oh, okay. Tell me more. What makes it different?
Well, it's that volcanic thing again. The Golan Heights Chardonnay has a really strong mineral taste, almost salty, and it kind of cuts through the fruit flavors. And instead of those like tropical fruit notes, it's more like green apple and pear, maybe even a little citrus.
So it's like a lighter, more refreshing style Chardonnay. What about the Sauvignon Blanc? Does it have that same Golan Heights mineral thing going on?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You'll find that flinty, almost smoky flavor in a lot of their white wines. But with the Sauvignon Blanc, you also get these bright passion fruit and guava aromas, and sometimes even a little bit of fresh herbs.
Now, you mentioned Riesling earlier, and yeah, I love a good Riesling. What's so special about the ones from this region?
Golan Heights Riesling is kind of a hidden gem. You know, those higher elevations with the cooler climate? It's the perfect spot for this grape. You get this wine that's like this perfect balance between sweet and acidic. It's like walking a tightrope between ripe apricot and lime zest.
Wow, I can almost taste it. You use the word tension. What does that actually mean? Like, how does it make the wine taste?
It's like a push and pull on your tongue, You get that burst of sweet fruit, but then the acidity kicks in and like cleanses your palate. And of course, you've got that mineral taste from the Golan Heights underneath it all, making it even more complex.
Man, you're making me want to rethink my usual white
Mm.
wines. Okay, before we get to the reds, what about Gewürztraminer? I know it can be a love it or hate it kind of wine.
It definitely has a strong personality, but the Golan Heights Gewürztraminer is actually really balanced. It still has those floral notes like roses and lychee, but because it's cooler there, it doesn't get too sweet. It's fresh and lively, and there's even a little spiciness to it.
Okay, you've convinced me. We need to get our hands on some of these white wines and do a tasting. But let's move on to the reds. I saw Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, the usual suspects, but also Pinot Noir, which I know is like notoriously difficult to grow.
It's true. Pinot Noir is really picky and needs very specific conditions. So it really says something about the winemakers in Golan Heights that they can make such good Pinot Noir.
What makes their Pinot Noir stand out?
Well, it's got this amazing balance between being delicate and powerful. You get those classic Pinot Noir smells, red berries, cranberries, a little earthiness. But then there's this spice note, too, that I haven't really found in Pinot Noirs from other places.
So it's complex and interesting.
Hmm.
What about the bigger reds like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot?
Those are wines that really age well, because of those high altitude vineyards. They have concentrated flavors of black currant and plum, sometimes a little cedar or tobacco from the oak barrels. They just get better and better over time.
I'm noticing a trend here. These Golan Heights winemakers are like experts at getting the best out of every grape, working with the land and the challenges you know.
It's like a dance between nature and what the winemakers do. They're super resourceful, always coming up with new ways to deal with things like not enough water or crazy weather.
The articles even mention some winemakers are trying things like concrete tanks for fermentation and aging wine in amphorae.
Right.
What's up with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of experimentation going on. Some wineries use concrete tanks because they keep the temperature really stable during fermentation. It can make the wine taste smoother and more complex. And then you have others who are going back to those old school methods, like aging wine in amphorae, those big egg-shaped clay pots. It lets a tiny bit of oxygen in and creates a really unique flavor.
So it's like this cool mix of old and new,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries, but also respecting the character of Golan Heights wine.
Exactly. And that's what makes this region so exciting. It's a wine world that's still being discovered and still changing.
Well, you've definitely got me curious. I'm ready to go on a Golan Heights wine adventure. But before we wrap up, I want to think about our listeners. Why should they care about Golan Heights wine? What makes it worth trying?
It's not just about finding a good bottle of wine. It's about supporting a place that's been through a lot, where making wine is an act of, perseverance. It's about trying something different, tasting something special, and appreciating the story behind it.
It's about opening a bottle and tasting history, a land shaped by volcanoes and cared for by passionate winemakers.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to visit and see the magic of Golan Heights for yourself.
Okay, I could talk about wine all day, but we need to wrap up. So I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. What's the one thing they should look for when they're at the store? Something that says, hey, this is a Golan Heights wine.
That's easy. Look for the minerality. It's in so many of these wines, a reminder of that volcanic soil. It's a taste of the earth, of history, of resilience, and it's just delicious.
It's like a secret code that says this wine has a story.
Exactly. And it's a story worth hearing.
Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about. Time to find a bottle of Golan Heights wine and taste it for yourself.
Can agree more. Cheers to trying new things and expanding our horizons.
Cheers to that. And hey, if you find new Golan Heights wine you love, let us know. We're always looking for new wines to try.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Happy sipping. So we've talked about, the terroir and the challenges and the grapes, but what does it all actually mean when you finally get to taste the Golan Heights wine?
That's when it all comes together. You're not just tasting, wine, you're tasting a place, a history, the passion of the people making it.
Okay, give me an example. Let's say our listener finds a bottle of Golan Heights Cabernet Sauvignon. What are they going to get when they take that first sip? Paint us a picture.
Okay, so close your eyes and imagine you've got this glass of deep red wine, almost ruby colored, and the first thing you get is the smell, like this rush of ripe black currants and plums, maybe a little dark chocolate and a hint of cedar from the oak. Then you take a sip and it's like velvet on your tongue with these smooth tannins. The fruit is really intense, but there's also this savory thing going on, almost like black olives or dried herbs. And then underneath it all, you get that little bit of minerality, a taste of the volcanic earth.
Wow, you really took us there.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they can capture so much of the place in the wine.
And that's what makes discovering a new wine region so cool. It's not just about, trying new flavors. It's about learning about a whole new part of the world.
That's a perfect way to put it, I think. So to all our listeners out there, go find a bottle of Golan Heights wine, give it a try, and see what you think of this special little corner of the wine world.
And let us know what you discover. We're always excited to hear about, people's wine adventures. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Cheers.